question to Professor Chenery is, how does BOND balance teaching, research, and services/leadership, particularly in regard to academic workload and future academic human resource strategy? So we're looking at the balance between teaching, research, and service.
Easy one.
Yes, an easy one to start with. Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I don't want you to be too shocked at my opening statement as an Executive Dean of Health Sciences and Medicine, but I was visiting a winery recently. I just thought I needed to rethink my dislike of Chardonnay, so I was at a winery. Anyway, there was a sign at the opening of the winery, and the title was Amount of Wine Consumed. And there was a circle, first bottle, and there was a second circle that said second bottle. But the key point to the graphic is that the first and the second bottle diagrams converged. And where they converged, where the Venn diagrams intersected, there was a little phrase, and it was entitled Moments of Brilliance. So what that says is that in this instance at the winery, your moments of brilliance are not going to come at the conclusion of the first bottle of wine. They're certainly not going to come at the conclusion of the second bottle of wine. But somewhere in that fuzzy boundary where they intersect are the moments of brilliance. And I'd like to use the analogy of the Venn diagrams to answer the question about how do we find a balance across teaching, research, service/leadership. Because really we should think of them as intersecting circles in a Venn diagram. And it's at the intersection of where those circles collide that the true magic happens, that the brilliance happens, that the value is co-created. So there's value in each of the circles, but it's at the intersection where we co-create value. It's at the intersection where the sum is greater than each of the parts. And interestingly, and for the purposes of my answer to you today, it's at the intersection where we can make efficiencies and where we can leverage off a research study to use in our teaching, which then impacts our service and vice versa. So maybe I could give you an example from my own career. And this was when I was a speech pathologist and working at a university, but taking students in a teaching clinic at one of the major public hospitals in Brisbane. And so I was a clinician, I was educating student therapists. One of the patients who came was a professor of linguistics from the university where I worked, who'd had a very severe stroke. And the only thing that it impacted, no paresis, no paralysis of face or limbs, the only thing it impacted was his language. How unfair could that be? Not just his ability to speak, but his ability to understand what was said and to read and to write. Now, over the course of the 9 months or so of therapy, where I supervised our student clinicians, I developed a rich resource of case material to use in my teaching. The students benefited absolutely from working with this gentleman, but I also published 3 case studies out of that 9 months of therapy. So that's a practical example of where I deliberately set forth to see how clinical service plus teaching plus research can lead to benefits across all 3, but also create some efficiencies. So each mission, research, learning, education, teaching and service, reinforce the other 2, and in my example give patients access to the best care because it's informed by research, but also leads to knowledge generation for our future clinical and in this case university workforce. So, moving on, the other comment I'll make is around some statistics that we had conducted at the University of Queensland, and it came to be called affectionately Siddle's Tale. Professor Siddle was the Pro-Vice-Chancellor Research at the time, and what he did was to create a graph of all of the university's many thousands of teaching and research academics, and he ranked them on herdic return. And not surprisingly, there was a big bunch of people up this left end with graphs up here, and then it slowly went down until there was a long tail of people with very little herdic return. What was interesting, however, is when the Deputy Vice-Chancellor academic overlaid her graph, which showed teaching excellence as a function of academic staff member. What would you think? Should it go like that? It didn't. The same people who were the most active in research got, on average, the best teaching evaluations. So once again, it highlights, in my mind at least, and to others, and I hope to you today, that by intersecting and creating those overlapping Venn diagrams, you can get something really special happening around your career. So, the bond balance around these intersecting circles. I thought I could answer that question best by talking about some principles that I've identified here at Bond in my now year here. I was a year old last week. So, for each individual academic, I think that it's important to emphasise that Bond balances it by focusing on the individual, and that's through the PDR process and through mentoring, and that's really important to understand. It's done collaboratively, so it's done with your supervisor, your direct report, and with input from your mentors. Also importantly, it's done flexibly, in that each of those circles around teaching, research and service can change in size and in scope through the different phases of your individual career and through the different stages of your individual lives. So what you've locked in 1 year does not necessarily have to stay locked in that same form and shape a couple of years down the track. Most importantly, I think, though, is that it's done strategically. So being busy for busy's sake is not a good idea in a university, because being busy will take up all of your time. So think strategically about how you can create those common intersecting elements. Where are the themes that you can identify and source that will create the magic whilst also being efficient? And this is collectively how we can start to look at how Bond manages this. So being really strategic in your career, it interests me that academics take a lot of time to think strategically about their teaching and their research, but very few take as much time to plan out the next 3 to 5 years of their career. In terms of leadership, I think it's important to differentiate between public leadership in what we see in our academic criteria, so that leadership that works for outside agencies or with outside agencies or creates big projects, and that's fine. But there's also a sense of private leadership that we should also be thinking about in our academic portfolios and also in our careers, and that is how we strategically craft our career into the future. So I'm going to finish now. I've got no idea what my timing is. Over, naturally. I did say I was a speech pathologist. We practice talking a lot in my profession. So from the individual to the next order, what I'll just finish off by saying is that through your direct reports, you'll understand how your individual balance is worked out. But then that then goes up to the next order of collective, through to the faculty level and through to the university level. So if all of that is too complicated, I just encourage you to go back to my first example of the intersecting circles and drink 2 bottles of wine.
Well, since there's actually 3 circles, right? So I guess we get 3 bottles of wine? Yeah. So thank you so much, Helen. And we now move on to Professor Nick James. And Nick, your question is, what is Bond's vision for the future of face-to-face, online, and blended teaching, and the balance between them? And I just got a little distracted thinking that now I get 6 bottles of wine because now we have 3 more circles. So, I guess it's 2. It's face-to-face and online, and the balance between. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I think when it comes to the ease by which we, and I mean we as just people, we can access knowledge and understanding and learning is, the rate at which that ease is increasing is enormously exciting. It's easy for any of us today to get online and access online courses where we can learn pretty much anything we want to learn. I mean, sometimes we have to pay for it, but more and more the materials and the courses that are available online are free. I mean, there are MOOCs on pretty much anything you want to learn about these days. So, and the rate at which the number of online courses is growing is exciting and a little intimidating for places like us, you know, traditional universities. Bond University, there are institutions that have moved into almost completely delivering their degrees and their programs online. Some successfully, some less so. Bond University's distinguishing feature, you know, the reason why students come here, the reason why students often pay a lot of money to be here, is because of the quality of the face-to-face experience. It's being in a classroom, in real space, in real time, with a real teacher, with real peers. And that's something that Bond University isn't going to be moving away from anytime soon. That real-time, face-to-face learning experience will remain at the heart of what it is that we do. Now, there are exceptions. I mean, each faculty has probably got a few subjects or a few programs or free courses where we're, you know, experimenting with completely online delivery, no face-to-face classes at all, just online courses. But they are the exception. The general rule is that all of our programs and all of our degrees and all our subjects will continue to have at least an element of face-to-face. And that face-to-face, that real-time interaction, will be at the heart of each program, each subject, each course. So what this revolution in online delivery gives us is a way to enhance that face-to-face experience, to build upon it, to, in some cases, take something that perhaps we might have traditionally done in a classroom and deliver it online. So there's a lot of content, you know, just basic information that we would like to convey to our students that is in many cases better conveyed online. You don't need to take up valuable face-to-face class time telling people things. If you want to tell your students something, find an interesting, engaging, exciting way to tell it. Think about doing it as a video online, for example. And then the limited amount of time that we have with our students in the classroom, we can save that for the really valuable type of learning experience, the conversations, the interaction, perhaps even the assessment. So we're not going to abandon classrooms. We're not going to abandon face-to-face teaching and jump right into online teaching. What we are going to is think carefully, think strategically about what tools that are available today that we can incorporate into our subjects, that we can incorporate into our teaching that is going to help us to improve the quality of the learning that the students receive. There are some dangers around that. The first one is that by enhancing our teaching with technology, we somehow lose something that is associated with the traditional classroom style of teaching. And I've seen that, you know, in some situations where we get so enthusiastic about some exciting new technology that we forget what it is that we're actually trying to do, which is to educate students. And we might abandon something that actually works. So I think that's why we need to be thoughtful and careful and strategic about the tools that we adopt. The changes that we make to our teaching in order to incorporate the latest technology shouldn't be driven by the technologies themselves. So we shouldn't be bringing something into the classroom or onto our website or into our subject just because it looks really cool or it's exciting or different or nobody else is doing it. That's not a good enough reason to enhance our teaching with technology. My preferred approach is the sort of the problem-driven approach. You know, we look at the way we're teaching now. Is there something that isn't working very well? Is there something that's a bit difficult or challenging or time-consuming or is really unpopular with the students? And is there perhaps a tool, a technology that can help us to address that problem? That is a sensible, thoughtful way of incorporating technology into our teaching. So I think that helps us to address that first danger, that we throw the baby out with the bathwater in some way, that we keep what's good about the traditional way of teaching and we adopt what's good about the new ways of teaching. The other challenge, and I think this is a really serious challenge that we're facing, is that everybody's doing this. All the universities are embracing the latest learning and teaching technologies. And it's a bit of an arms race. And what we have to do is continually compare the quality of our enhanced teaching with what other institutions are doing. And that means that we have to work pretty hard to at least keep up, let alone get to the head of the pack. We need to be constantly aware of what other institutions are doing, both in Australia and overseas. And we need to make sure that we are not seen as, using a 20th century approach in the 21st century. Now, the approach that we've taken to date, I think, has been largely academic driven. So OLT does fabulous work in making resources and support available to academics who want to incorporate technology into their teaching. But it's largely driven by the academic. You're waiting for the academic to say, yes, I would like to create some videos, or yes, I would like to up the quality of my website. And that works to a point. It means that the early adopters are getting all the support that they need, and we're doing some really good things in isolated pockets around the university. But what we need to be doing is trying to get everybody else to up their game. And that's where it becomes really challenging. Challenging both in terms of resources, because OLT is fantastic, but there's only a limited number of people who work there. We don't have an army there ready to work one-on-one with every single person. So that's kind of the challenge that the university is wrestling with at the moment. I know my personal approach in law over the last few years has been to provide resources to the academics, to provide the support, and to say, basically, over to you. I'll teach you how to do it, but you're going to have to do it yourself, and you're going to have to initiate yourself. But the more I see about what other universities and other institutions are doing, sort of the quality of the online delivery of aspects of their programs, the quality of their online presence, it makes me realize that we need to do more and more. So, KEITHA and I and the other associate deans of learning and teaching, and we're having conversations about how we can put more resources into this in order to not just show people how to do it, but I think we're going to have to do more with a lot of academics. We're going to have to actually knock on the door of their office, sit down and say, okay, what are you teaching this semester? Let's have a look at your online presence. Let's have a look at your website. Okay, we suggest that you make these specific changes in order to improve the quality of your online delivery, and here are the resources that we're going to be providing. So it's going to be more of a push approach, I suspect. Now that's going to require time and resources, and that's something that we're working on at the moment. So it's an exciting time. I don't think it's like a short-term process of increasing the quality of our online delivery and then sitting back and saying, job done. I think this is going to be almost inevitably an aspect of what it means to be an academic teaching at university, probably from now on. So there's work to be done, but the support's there, the goodwill is there, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it. Thanks.
I feel both privileged and kind of sad at the same time, because I feel so privileged to get to sit here and listen to such wonderful, insightful leaders who can really take us forward. And I feel kind of sad because I look at who's here, and it's preaching very much to the choir. And so I think that the comments that you've both made so far are just so timely and so important in terms of how do we strategically look at our strengths and get people to look not only at how to grow Bond forward, but how to grow themselves forward as well, and how it can be a win-win situation, and how do we infect others with the enthusiasm that's here in the room to inspire others for this level of excellence. So with that, the next question is to Associate Professor Anthony Erickson. What are your suggestions for facilitating cross-faculty dialogue and cooperation in learning and teaching strategies? So whole of university cross-faculty.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just say a couple of things in preamble? Firstly, when I look at you guys, I don't feel sad. I actually say thank you very much for coming along. Fantastic. Very nice to have the audience here. Okay. Secondly, if my voice sounds a little bit raspy, guys, I've been in Sydney for the last week. If you've been following the weather in Sydney, absolutely abysmal, and it probably wasn't helped by leaving at 3 a.m. to drive back here, a 9 or 10 hour drive yesterday, so apologies if it fades in and out. Firstly, I just want to emphasise also I'm the Associate Dean Learning and Teaching. I'm not the Dean, which might mean that I'm a little bit closer to learning and teaching, and also might mean I can say things the Dean cannot up here as well, so we'll see. Again, just to reiterate, my question was, what are your suggestions for facilitating cross-faculty dialogue and cooperation in learning and teaching strategies? And I'd like to say at the outset, I think it's a really important objective, basically, and not just for learning and teaching, because we're a very small university or compared to other universities, and I think integration, cross-faculty communication, all those sorts of things are incredibly important and can help us a lot in the business. I think we already have a number of ways that we do this, and there might be things you would consider like the University Learning and Teaching Committee, which has representatives from all faculties and which KEITHA chairs. I just thought I'd get that one in early. Okay. We have such weeks such as this where we get people from all the different faculties come along. We've had, since I've been at the university, increased emphasis on teaching and learning through promotions and different courses and different rewards for teaching. And we've had a lot of different working groups as well. So I think we do a few things at the moment. But I think in terms of if you'd like to improve that cross-faculty dialogue, there's a number of problems that actually just traditionally stand in the way of doing that. Pardon me, guys. One of the problems here, and I think it's not distinct or unique just to Bond, is that faculties, academic faculties, are traditionally quite insular. Sorry?
I'm on standby.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, we're just quite insular, not just at faculty level, but almost at department level, and sometimes even down to the academic level. And we do not, in many ways, talk a lot to the other ones, and indeed when we do, it's often sometimes even confrontational or turf protection or those sorts of things, because we want to keep what we do and we think we do it better than other people. So I think it's a barrier in trying that naturally exists. I think academia itself is a very individualistic profession, and we all concentrate on our research and our teaching. We do what we think works, and we have a PhD which we say gives us the credibility to actually do what we say we do. I think also with teaching and learning strategies, the way we articulate teaching and learning strategies and the metrics, or perhaps lack of metrics to actually measure whether we're doing a much better job, is important. And I think Nick's topic on blended learning is quite relevant to what I'm going to say in terms of if you get 10 academics together in a room to talk about blended learning, then you'll get probably 10 different definitions of what it means on blended learning. So that's a problem to start with. If you want cross-faculty communication, we spend a lot of time, well, what's the definitional issue to start with? What are we looking at? What are we trying to do? Then how do we measure whether we're doing a better job of that? So what are the metrics, basically? What does it look like when we get there, and how will we know? Okay, so having all these people get together is only good if we know what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to measure that, and feedback in terms of whether we're doing a good job, I think. And that's quite different to research, because research, I think the metrics are a lot easier in terms of publications and journals and HRD supervision. So teaching is a bit more ethereal, I guess, when we're a little bit more qualitative, and we have teaching evaluations and they're very quantitative and different opinions, but trying to get a better handle. I notice another of our strategies is ensure the highest quality of teaching. And again, that will mean different things to different people. So if we don't articulate well what we're doing, it becomes very difficult. And the last point I wanted to make here in terms of problems, though, again, what Nick brought up was a lot of blended learning is being driven by individual academics. And I think a lot of the time we assume that the issues and the initiatives we need will be driven at the academic level. And I think, like most important initiatives in most organisations, important initiatives should be and must be supported and driven by the top, and be very clearly articulated and rewarded and emphasised throughout the organisation. So I think just relying on academics to improve the cross-faculty communication. The good ones, the great teachers, the ones who would always do that, we might need a little bit more incentive or encouragement or structure for the others to do that. Pardon me, guys. So the sorts of things I was actually setting up are fairly holistic, I guess, in terms of how we might improve cross-faculty dialogue. And I think we have metrics for research, we have metrics for teaching in terms of evaluations. There's no reason that we can't set up metrics for collaboration, communication, integration across our staff and across our faculties, that we measure how good a job we're doing and the extent to which we are participating in those sorts of things. And on that basis, you can certainly, I think it's no point doing these things unless it's of some interest to the deans to be doing these sorts of things, having their people spending time talking to people from other faculties. So there's no reason why we can't have KPIs as part of the dean's portfolio as well, that we say, what are your people doing? To what extent are they participating and looking at teaching and teaching strategies with other universities, not other universities, other faculties? I think there are very few programs in our university, small as it is, where we have cross-faculty programs, where we have more than one faculty do that. So I think there's a lot of ways we can actually set very specific objectives and metrics and measure those things and then make them known and reward people and certainly reward faculties for doing that as well. I think a lot of these things need to be driven at a faculty level, and faculties need to get some rewards and deans need to get some of those rewards for that as well. I think also it would be nice if, given we have good metrics for teaching and learning strategies, that we get good feedback on whether we're doing a good job, whether we're contributing, whether we're making progress, and hence people can say, we can say to faculties, you're doing a great job, you're doing a good job. I think we made some progress with this on eTVALs, where we now get our average TVAL scores for faculty versus others, and we can see how we're going, what do we need to do. Laura's doing really well, maybe we should go and talk to them. So I think encouraging a bit of competition between faculties and even departments from our own faculty as well just creates a bit of interest and excitement. And again, in most businesses, you have people that are tracking their business day by day. We don't do those sorts of things because we don't have the ability to monitor and measure and see, I think, whether we're doing a really good job. And then I think lastly, my idea would be people should be rewarded for doing these things. We have, academics are required to do a lot of things to get involved in more cross-faculty dialogue, committees, groups, whatever format that may be. There should be some sort of rewards or incentives or encouragement. It might be a pat on the back, it might be a certificate. It doesn't have to be anything too big, but I think those sorts of things are important as well. So basically what I'm looking at when I say how to try and encourage cross-faculty dialogue is make sure we've got very specific teaching and learning strategies and make sure they're very specific, everybody understands what we're doing, where we're going, make sure they can be measured, make sure then people can get involved about those and understand whether they're making a difference, and then provide rewards to them on that basis so that there is an incentive to participate in those things as well. Sorry about my voice, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ant. Again, very inspirational in that not only are we addressing the problems and issues and where we need to go from here, but also the solutions and how we can get there and ideas. So next we're going to hear from Professor Brenda Marshall and this leads back to, I think, sort of where we came from as well, it's been touched on by the previous panelists. How will Bond University, in the context of learning and teaching, stay up to date, current, and relevant with industry practice, employer expectations, and 21st century skills? Thanks, Brenda.
Thanks, Shelley, and I hope that you reserve some time at the end for your own comments, because I know you've been engaged in important research about graduate employability. And I think one of the key questions that you've looked at is how can institutions support the knowledge, the skills, the attributes that graduates need to succeed in the workplace. And for those of you that know of my involvement in helping to implement the new core curriculum here at Bond, it won't surprise you to hear that I appreciate the connection between that question and the question that was very much at the forefront of the minds of the original core working group, chaired by Cindy Fisher from the Faculty of Business and Linda Crane from HSM, who's in the back row there, when they led the comprehensive review of the existing core back in 2013, only 2 years ago. And as part of that, the original core working group looked at large-scale surveys of graduate employers, such as Graduate Careers Australia and the Australian Association of Graduate Employers for advice about what employers are looking for in new university graduates. They also talk to employers of recent bond graduates about the skills and attributes that set those graduates apart and what they might be lacking. And I know that they consulted with students and alumni as well. And the major themes that emerged from that inquiry were all about the importance of communication skills, both oral and written, about teamwork, leadership, problem-solving, thinking, analytical skills, and planning and organization. So besides all of the discipline-specific content of a degree and good academic results, employers today are looking for employability skills such as enhanced communication skills, the ability to work as part of a team, and a problem-solving attitude. So students really do need to be well-rounded graduates. And it was all of that information that shaped the essential criteria for the revised core curriculum. And so the new Bond core is designed to provide a shared foundation of skills and ideas for undergraduate students and to contribute to employability and career success. So we have Core 1, Critical Thinking and Communication, which is designed to foster clear and informed thinking and effective oral and written communication skills. And that's across a student's academic, professional, and personal life. There's Core 2, Leadership and Team Dynamics, which develops skills for managing oneself, for contributing to teams and providing effective leadership. And again, those skills are useful in academic, professional, and non-work arenas. There's Core 3, Ethical Thought and Action, that builds understanding of ethical frameworks and the personal capacity for ethical practice so that students are equipped with the tools, the experience, and the skills to respond effectively to any ethical challenges that they face in their professional and personal lives. And of course, there's Core 4, Beyond Bond, Professional Development and Community Engagement. This is the innovative program that spans the duration of a student's degree, complementing academic studies with extracurricular activities that focus on personal development and employability skills. It's under the direction of the Career Development Centre here at Bond that Beyond Bond takes students out of the classroom and into work and community environments where they develop confidence, maturity, independence, and advanced employability skills that will set them apart in the competitive job marketplace. Now, our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Brailsford, has said, and in effect, I'm paraphrasing, that Bond is the only Australian university that requires all undergraduate students to complete a series of course subjects aimed at producing leaders of tomorrow, equipped with generic skills so important to a successful career. And he's emphasised that the personal development opportunities offered through Beyond Bond will set our graduates apart. We're very fortunate at Bond to have a dedicated career development centre that provides outstanding service and support to students, graduates, and employers. And the CDC has their own team of business development specialists who reach out to employers to build and maintain connections, create opportunities for students, and gain feedback from employers. So I think it's all of that, combined with the requirements for professional accreditation of many of our degrees and the industry connections that so many Bond academics have, that will help us keep up to date with industry practice, employer expectations, and 21st century skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. That was a wonderfully comprehensive summary of all of the wonderful initiatives that we have in this area. So last week, I was in Adelaide at the Deans of Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities Conference. And it was the hot topic of conversation. Japan, by government decree, has closed its humanities degree programs. It's in the process. A large number of them have already been closed immediately, and it's closing more. So it was just such a and upsetting, a challenging and intriguing conversation that was going on at that place. And so the reason why I had been invited there on behalf of Linda and myself and the rest of our team was to do a workshop on employability from the research project that Brenda mentioned. And boy, it was a really hot topic in terms of how do we empower students, what do we do to support their employability in this context. So not only do we live in a world where the employment rates are the lowest they've been in 20 years, at least 20, some say 32. So the Graduate Careers Australia surveys the graduates 4 months, undergraduates 4 months after their graduation. And right now we're at a rate where 68% of our undergraduate graduates are employed full-time. And so it's really been taking a plunge for a long time. So not only are we in that context, but we're also in a context where our world chooses that it's wise to cancel humanities out. And I'm saying this as someone who did her bachelor's degree in English literature. So I think that these challenges and contexts are really vital for us now. I won't take up any more time on employability because we have 3 questions for KEITHA, but maybe what we'll do is I think that I'll read the 3 questions, and then what we'll do is have KEITHA answer the hot one that was asked by many people. And then what we'll do, we've been told that the tea will remain out until 2:45, and they can only, our pop-up studio can actually only really accommodate 1 or 2 people at a time. So we can go have tea while the hard workers on this end of the curve start doing the pop-up work. So that's a good time to ask KEITHA and the other panelists the other 2 questions. But I do encourage you to go to graduateemployability.com, where Bond has led the way for there to be over 70 video clips, 11 full case studies, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all kinds of resources there to improve employability, and we need to do it all together and embed it in the everyday curriculum. So KEITHA, the 3 questions are, drum roll, and then we'll go to the top number 1 question. At Bond, and this is the number 1 question, what are the indicators of quality teaching and how much onus will be placed on ETVAL results in PDRs and academic promotion? So that question was sent in by a large number of people. The other 2 questions are, how does Bond align, embed, and balance the student learning and teaching experience with the broader student experience? And I think Brenda's covered that off for us very nicely. And the 3rd question is, why does Bond not include numeracy as a graduate attribute or in the Bond core as well? And what are Bond's plans to support students in developing their numeracy? So we'll go back to the question 1 about ETVALs. So the question, and then we'll go to coffee, and if people need to go off to teaching and whatnot, we completely understand. At Bond, what are the indicators of quality teaching and how much onus will be placed on ETVAL results in PDRs and academic promotion?
Thanks, Helen. For those of you who are academics especially, you'll know that I've been visiting faculties to talk about our new teaching quality standards policy. Yesterday morning, the Academic Senate actually approved the draft of that policy for going out for comment. So that policy has now gone out, and it will be available for comment for 4 weeks once it's out. So that will be probably in about a week's time. But this question aligns very well with the purpose of what we're trying to achieve with that policy. And I have mentioned in numerous forums, including the opening yesterday, is that Bond, with good credibility, can claim to be the best teaching university in Australia. So under the Australian Graduate Survey, for 3 years now, we have topped the students' assessment. So our past students are saying, our teaching is great. And in fact, over the last 5 years, we've topped it in 4 of the years, and we were second in the 1 year when we didn't top it. So we do have some credibility in making that claim. But one of the things that I feel very strongly about is we can't just rest on our laurels. And some of the things that all of the speakers have talked about are relevant to this. But the world is changing at a very fast pace. So if we just keep doing exactly what we're doing in the same way without thinking about how we're going to innovate in the learning and teaching space, we will eventually be overtaken, and then before very long we'll be left behind. So we can't just say we have a special model here, therefore we're not going to do anything else in this emerging space. But as I thought Nick articulated very well, is that we can, I believe as well, maintain the very best of what we currently do really well, but take from what is actually happening in the technology space and work out, well, what works for us and how can we actually use it to better enhance what we do in the classroom. Whereas, as you know, a lot of universities, especially some of the regional Australian universities, they concentrate on technology to replace face-to-face teaching, and we're largely talking about MOOCs or totally online courses. So that's always going to be something that's very unique to Bond University. So bringing it back to ETVALs then, and I think I'm well on the record with this, is I think ETVALs are a very good source of information as an indicator. I've never believed that they are a measure. I don't think that we can, in a research sense, if we were going to try and publish the results of ETVALs as absolute evidence of what the quality of teaching is, we would have trouble getting it published. Okay, we have small sample sizes, we have issues with in terms of, and Danielle can probably help me out, but just how much we over-survey students. They're tired, they're exhausted, they're not very good results that necessarily in a purely measurement sense. But as an indicator, when students are unhappy with something that happens in the classroom, they tend to tell us. So lower TVALs tell us something. When students are very happy about something, they tend to tell us. So higher TVALs tell us about something. And then in general, there's just a sort of a useful information for us to have to understand the students' perceptions and their satisfaction with what we are doing. Because that's another important thing that people who are critical of the use of TVALs bring up, is that students don't necessarily know what's good for them. So if you're being a really good teacher, you'll get really low TVALs, because tough love or whatever other philosophy of teaching that people have. But I suppose from my perspective is, as I said, I don't believe that the student perceptions are the absolute measure of the quality of our teaching, but they are an indicator. And if we are teaching in ways that students don't appreciate or aren't satisfied with, I think we at least have to question what we're doing. So I think that is a very important thing. And then the other thing I would say is, at a university level, when you aggregate all of the results of TVALs, then that's when you start getting a little bit closer to something that might be able to be published, because we do end up with a reasonable sort of sample size. And based on that sample size, the good news is Bond is on an upward trajectory. So we have had a continuously upward trend in both our educator results and in our subject results since the first semester of 2012, when we've got the best records of what's been happening with ETVAL. So I guess as a good academic, I like TVALs when I want to interpret them that way, and I don't necessarily like them in other ways that I want to interpret them. But certainly they are useful indicators. So bringing it back to the teaching quality standards policy, the TVALs are included as one of the criteria that are used for the thresholds. And just for those of you that may not be familiar with the draft of the policy, what we are looking at is acknowledging and recognising the excellence of our teachers by allowing them to achieve levels of accomplishment. So we have 2 levels of accomplishment. One is the accomplished teacher, which is basically what we have been talking about as acknowledging that at Bond we have excellent teachers, and we want to have the ability to sort of say there's something special or extra special about Bond teachers. So our accomplished teachers are the ones that we will say are reaching that threshold. And then we have our outstanding teachers, so those that actually go above and beyond and are achieving even greater things than what we would normally expect from our excellent bond teachers. So when we were looking at defining those thresholds, it's, well, what do we do with TVALs? And it was, by some, suggested, well, we ignore TVALs. But bringing it back to reality, well, that's not very sensible, because we do already have a very well established and developed ETVAL system, and whatever its weaknesses happen to be, it is an objective, scientific, concrete measure that we are able to extract. It's just that we have to interpret it carefully, but it's not to be thrown out just because it does have some limitations. So when we were deciding, well, what level of emphasis do we put on ETVALs? And what we came up with is a basic minimum, as opposed to something that people might aspire to. And you may well be aware at the present time, and Danielle Wright, who's sitting in front of me, looks after our ETVAL system, is that we actually have what we call an alert system, which is if any one of the educators actually achieves a score of 3.25 or less, that is actually referred to the faculty and who may work with the Office of Learning and Teaching to actually assist that academic to look at what's actually happening and what extra assistance they can be given. So if we have an alert at 3.25, what is our level for accomplished? And what we actually came up with is that it's a minimum of 3.5. And so that wasn't from the point of view of actually trying to put that very high, so as to say, well, ETVAL is a measure that we're looking at, but is to actually say, well, what is the minimum level of ETVAL that we're willing to accept that this person is still an accomplished teacher? So that was very much our intention. So a necessary but not sufficient criteria for saying, are they accomplished? And then likewise at the outstanding teachers level, what level of TVAL do we use? And I guess it was perhaps a little bit crude way of picking it, but we were working on this policy in 151, and the average or the mean educated TVAL in 151 for bond educators was 4.35. So we picked 4.35. So basically we're saying you need to be in at least the top 50% of bond educators to be, and it's outstanding educator. And then of course both categories still have lots of other qualitative measures around them. So in more specifically addressing the question, I think our intention, and I'm saying our, and sort of pointing to Anthony here, University Learning and Teaching Committee, was to actually come up with a policy that sort of almost detracted from the temptation to use ETVAL as the only measure, because we wanted to say there are other qualitative factors that determine what, in our view, is an excellent teacher. Okay, we don't want it just to be TVALs because, well, again, there's a lot of experienced academics here. We all know people that joke about the way they can, trick students to give them good TVALs. There's a few tricks of the trade you can apply, and they wouldn't necessarily be things that we would say are aligned with excellence in teaching. So we do want to incentivise people the right way, so that they're not just trying to play a TVAL game, they are actually dedicated to the quality of their teaching. And it kind of leads to, when this policy was discussed at Senate, there was a little bit of a conversation about the fact, and I'll concentrate for a second on outstanding teachers, that we required outstanding teachers to do an awful lot of things. And it's not just being able to achieve at least that mean TVAL. There's actually requirements around collegiality and peer support, the provision of leadership to colleagues. Hopefully having gained national recognition through our OLTC citations or OLT grants, if that doesn't happen, through their scholarship of learning and teaching. But there's lots of different avenues, but being in the classroom and getting a good TVAL is not enough, okay? And it was kind of, to me, sort of somebody asked the question, you're not really having a policy about what is a good teacher. you're actually having a policy about something else. And I said very firmly, in my view, even if we have a teacher who is constantly getting 5 out of 5 for their TVELs, I'm not going to believe they're an outstanding teacher unless I can see they're providing leadership to their colleagues. And I will stand very, very fast behind that. So I think that's sort of looking at the use of TVELs from another direction, is they're not enough. You do actually have to be doing all of these other things. I guess I'll jump a little to the academic promotions process, because one of the things we did do while we were developing the policy was intentionally attempting to align it to academic promotions, because we had some feedback. You'll be aware that we did add teaching scholarship streams for promotions, and people were telling us that we're not exactly sure what we need to be doing to achieve promotions under these schemes. So now what we have in place is a policy which is sort of saying to staff, well, work towards becoming an accomplished teacher, work towards becoming an outstanding teacher, and all of those things that you are doing are things that are going to lead you through the path of promotion under those criteria. So they're not perfectly aligned with sort of associate professor or professor level, but certainly all of the things that are within the criteria for those thresholds are all things that count under those criteria. So certainly it's all directed together. So maybe wrapping that all up back to the PDRs then, is PDRs are still going to be faculty-based, and relating it back to the question about TVELs, TVELs have always been used by faculties when people are looking at PDRs, but I would believe that that's not the only thing that people have been looking at PDRs at the moment, because they do look at other things, and you're asking questions about other achievements that staff have had relating to their learning and teaching, and what innovations they have created and so on. So our hope is, with the formulation of this policy, that gives even more structure to that PDR debate, because they can actually now focus on not just generally please tell me what you've achieved in the learning space, but they can actually focus on those criteria. And it is our intention, fingers crossed, assuming the policy is ultimately accepted, that we will modify the PDR form so that there are sections that actually address each of the criteria, so that, again, it makes it easier for academics to work out where they are in that space. So I don't know, Shelley, did you want me to stop there? Or, okay, thank you.